I am joined with Brother Jim Hall, everyone. How are you doing, Brother Hall?
Excellent. Thank you, Justin. I appreciate you having me on the show tonight.
I appreciate you coming on. I am really excited. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, just your background as an individual?
I work in marketing. I do marketing for an auction service, and I'm also the director of programs for the Grand Lodge of Ohio. So I know you maybe have one, but I will be speaking in my own views, not the views of the Grand Lodge of Ohio. So I just want to start that right off. So, but that's what I kind of do. The program job, I kind of do all the back end service. Any problem that brothers have, they get a hold of me, and I kind of walk them through what they need to do. And obviously the marketing, we're getting the auction out there. I have a wife and two young boys, and we're running all over the place and running the
Nice.
lodges and, trying to make sure everything fits in the best that we can.
Yeah, that's always a good disclaimer to throw in there,
Yeah,
especially
exactly.
especially the way things are these days. So
That's right.
it's always very wise to do. Have you seen any advantages or changes with implementation of marketing and social media?
Oh my goodness. In general, and I'm going to talk on a few different levels here because at a Grand Lodge level, sure.
Mhm.
And the nice thing is they have money to put towards it.
Yeah.
So it's really easy to get likes and followers when you push money behind it.
Yes. Yes.
And we also have a really nice our back end product is the Grandview, and I don't know if Texas is on that or
We
not.
are. Yes.
Okay. So we are funneling those through the prospect process
Hmm.
and bringing them in, and we have a multi-tiered CRM email project that we do that is really kind of paying dividends. And the big thing is at the Grand Lodge level, we want people that are on Facebook, on Instagram, whatever they're on, that may not know a Mason,
Hmm.
to be able to have that access. Now obviously you're not going to be able to go on and sign your petition and enroll, but this way we can at least designate you. Okay, you're in this area, we can put you in contact with this lodge that is active and willing to take on a prospect, and then it moves into their meeting,
Hmm.
and their prospects from there.
Nice.
But on a small level, on our local lodge level, the big thing with the doing the internet is just the visual. There's so many people that, and my father-in-law is one of them. When I joined, he said, I've been in East Palestine for 64 years, and I've seen that Masonic sign. I've never been up there. I don't know what they do.
Yeah.
And that question prompted me the next lodge meeting, and I wasn't even in a seat at this point. I just joined real green, and I'm like, hey, can I take a picture in here and post it on our Facebook?
Hmm.
And our secretary, who this year is his 27th year as secretary, you know how that, you don't get out of those seats.
No, we don't. It's a lifelong commitment.
Yeah, he said, yeah, you can do what you want. I'll make you the admin. And it just it just took off. And from there, I think that we are able to reach out and people know what's going on, and whether or not that brings people to the front door or not, but it's giving them the opportunity to see what we're doing a little bit.
Yes.
That's actually, I mean, kind of leads into how I got into Masonry.
Hmm.
And I don't want to just lead the show, but
No, let's go
I
right
guess I'll
into
just
it.
roll right into it since we're
Let's
here.
roll with it.
I was delivering furniture, and I came in on my day off, and I rode with a gentleman. He was the driver that day. Never worked with him before. I'd been in the job 4 or 5 months, and he brings up a gentleman that was on our school board, Rube Ginder, and he's like, "Yeah, I know Rube from Lodge." I'm like, "Oh my God, I've known Rube 20 some years. Just he's on the school board. I know him from around town. I've known him my whole life." He's like, "Yeah, he's a member of Lodge." And I'm like, "Oh, you guys go to the Moose Lodge?" And he's like, "No, the Masonic Lodge." And at that point, and I kind of have to back up a little bit because I got the cart ahead of the horse here. probably 10 years before that, I mentioned to my wife, hey, I want to be a Mason. And she's like, and legit. And I was just listening to one of your podcasts. It's funny. National Treasure. It just came out, and I don't want to attribute it all to Nicolas Cage and that, but I'd seen the Square and Compass, and my grandfather was a Mason, and he passed away when I was a freshman. So all I can remember is his ring and the emblem on his car. I never got to talk to him about it. And he was an old school Mason, so he wasn't telling anybody about it. You just had to ask.
Yeah.
So it was always in the back of my head. And when that came out, it was kind of like a trigger. It was like, oh, you know what? I need to re-look at this. And I told my wife, and she's like, well, go do it. And I'm like, okay, and this is like 9 o'clock at night. And the hard part is, and this is where the internet's such a big thing to me. It's such important to me. I didn't have somebody, or I didn't know that I had somebody, and in Rube Ginder's case, he doesn't wear a ring. He doesn't have an emblem. He doesn't talk about Masonry unless you're a Mason outside of Masonry. He keeps it to himself. It's actually, for me, being as loud as I am, it's very hard to understand why he would do that. But that's his thing, his personal thing, and that's where he keeps it. But after that transgression with my wife, it was 10 years until I stumbled upon this driver, Ryan Crescano, worship brother Ryan Crescano. And as soon as that, he said he's from the Freemason Lodge. I mean, it was 8 hours of back and forth questions and, hey, is it this and is it that? And I'm lucky enough that Ryan is very open to just talk. So he just went with the whole thing. And the next day I had a petition, and the rest is history. 10 years later, here I am, and here I am on your show, and I can't believe it. It's wild when you the saying gets beat to death, but you get out of it what you put into it.
Yep.
And yeah, everybody, when I said that, just rolled their eyes like, oh my God, we've heard this 1,000 times. But when you get out there and you get active and you just throw yourself into it, it's wild where Freemasonry will take you and the connections. And it's a whole different game. I suggest doing that if you're listening. We had a gentleman interested in Lodge that came beforehand to the meal that we had. And a few of us sat there and talked to him about it. And he said, he's like, in my life, I realized that, there were times where I had a group, whether it was 4-H or it was high school or it was this or that. And he's like, I've just been going through the motions with, I go to work, I go home, and I have my family, and that's it. And he's like, not that I'm upset that it's just that, but you lose those groups. And he's like, I feel like maybe Masonry could give me that something to strive for, something to, spread my wings a little more. And that's the exact same thing I told him is, you can hop in here and go through your 3 degrees and pay your dues and get nothing out of it. Or you can jump in, and I actually brought this podcast up. I'm like, before Freemasonry, I was so shy. And to be honest, I'm still shy. I was actually texting a guy in Cleveland about how I was nervous because I didn't have a set of show notes that I normally kind of go off of. And on my podcast, I'll have the show notes. And like we said before, it's just a tangent after that. And the show notes kind of bring us back.
Yeah.
But that still was in my head a little bit. And without Freemasonry jumping into it, I would never be here. The things I would have never done. And that's why I told him, if you jump into it with both feet and just embrace it, you'll never know the places it'll take you. I can't tell you it's going to make you a podcaster and $1 million or something crazy but you don't know. You don't know where you may end up in Grand Line someday. Who knows where you'll be?
Yep. So for the listeners, And you may be surprised to know this, but aside from a few messages between me and Jim, this is actually our first real conversation, right?
Yeah.
But as you can tell, it's going well. And
Yes.
I always say that there's no strangers in Freemasonry, just friends you haven't met yet.
Sure.
And that ties in exactly with what you're saying. I mean, without that fraternal bond, we would probably never be having this conversation. But here we are today. So let's talk about your podcast.
Sure.
What's it called? Let's go ahead and go that route and tell us what inspired you to do this.
So the podcast is the Traveling Man Masonic Podcast. And it's on Anchor. It's on every podcasting place that I can put it on, What transpired, honestly, I was sitting in my house with my wife, and it was probably end of September, early November. And I'm like, listen, I always bounce everything off her, and I can tell at times she's kind of tired of me, especially now with me working in, I work at home and I work for Lodge. So even if I'm kind of griping some days, it's always about Lodge. So, but, I said, listen, I want to do something else. I want to try something. And I'm kicking around a podcast. And she's like, you should do it. I'm like, yeah, but I don't know anything. I have no clue, absolutely no clue about a podcast. And she's like, her parents, I love them to death. They will not get me a Christmas gift. Like, this is the most important thing. Like, they are going to spend $50 every time. It does not matter. So she's like, why don't you have my mom get you a microphone, and we'll get a microphone, and then you can start. Mm-hmm. And honest to God, that's how it started, was like, okay, we'll just figure it out. And it was just learning on the fly. And I was lucky enough that I had someone that had graduated a year or so behind me that was doing her podcast, and I messaged her, and she said, oh yeah, you should check out Anchor. It's a really nice platform, and you can do a lot of stuff. It's, have to put a lot of money into it if you don't want. And to this day, I edited my first podcast. I've never listened to it since then. I don't want to, because I'm scared to. I'm 50 podcasts in, and I'm scared to go back and hear that thing, because I know it was bad. I know it was terrible. But it was just okay, we're gonna see what happens. And it started out, I had a guy that, the first guy at the furniture business that I rode with that explained Masonry to me. After that, a few years down the road, I became the guy that was driving the truck, and then I had helpers and whatnot. And I had a guy that was with me, and we were all three of us were close friends, and he hadn't joined Masonry. We went back and forth and back and forth. And one day he came in with this petition. So I wanted him to be the first guy on the podcast. And to me, as a podcaster now looking at it, he's one of my closest friends. He is so quiet and not a talker. And to be if you listen to the podcast, that's him talking a lot, and that's because of Masonry. He was when we brought him in as entered apprentice, and he gets mad I say this, but I keep doing it. I call it the tadpole effect. He would like swim right behind myself or Ryan, no matter where we were. He was like right behind us. and the amazing thing now is, now he's senior warden of our lodge, and just does it. He just goes. He doesn't ask for my approval. He doesn't follow. He just, and the thing now is, sitting as a past master and have went through all of that, those chairs, I see that and think, like, his ashlar's changing right now, and he don't even know it yet. Like, I get to see it because I've been through it. So it's kind of that cool thing. But I wanted him to be my first guest, and that's how I started. and just started kind of winging it. I had some guys from my lodge that came on, and we did some good things. We screwed up some things. I didn't know how to when I was saving things, I would save them wrong. They would all jumble together, and people would be calling me the day it released and said, "Hey, I don't understand what you're talking about in this section." Like, "Oh, well, I saved this. I saved the sound bites wrong."
Yeah.
So it was a real learn on the fly. And the wild thing is, it's been over 2 years now, and we've hit over 30,000 listens, and we're in 130 different countries we've been heard in, which to me, it just blows my mind. It blows my mind that you and I are talking in Ohio and Texas, and these guys messaged me. We have a lodge from Kentucky that's actually, they messaged us and want to come to do a Kentucky Master Mason in East Palestine because they heard the podcast.
Cool.
And all I wanted to do is go talk about something I love. And if I can spread that light of Masonry just a little bit, and maybe get a few guys that have never heard of Masonry or were on the fence and jump into it, well, then I've given back as much as I can. Me talking to 10 different people, I may touch 4 of them, 5 of them, but maybe 3 or 4 of those, maybe 2 of those guys will never join Masonry, but maybe 3 or 4 of them love that deep in depth about the trowel or about the 24-inch gauge or whatever it may be. That's their thing. And that's why so many different podcasts are pluses for everybody, because, all right, man, you know what? I don't really want to listen to John Doe talk about his journey again, but I wouldn't mind digging deeper into why they call the master's chair this,
Yeah.
and that's the cool thing of having that many options like that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like I like esoteric Masonry. I don't delve into it as much as I would like to, but I love hearing about it. Right.
Sure.
I'm not a historian, but I love Robert Marshall, like great guy. Love the guy. But you can't travel anywhere in Waco without hearing a story about it, which is cool. I enjoy hearing history, but I'm not a historian, if that makes sense. Like,
yes,
back in the day when History Channel actually showed history, I would watch the documentaries. That's interesting, but I'm not gonna go to a battlefield and tell you about it. I'm just not gonna remember all that stuff. But
exactly.
It's the old saying, different strokes for different folks, right? Like at the end of the day, though, we could all come together and we could all have conversations and be brothers. We don't have to have a common interest outside of the commonality of Freemasonry. We can come from all walks of life. We can have all kinds of different backgrounds.
Sure.
At the end of the day, we can all sit together and have a good time, have a conversation like we're doing now.
That's it. And I quit. I'm a comic book guy, a fantasy guy. I tell the guys, if you're a comic book guy, it's like your fortress of solitude. And you go into that in your home lodge, and all the other stuff of the world that's going on, whatever that may be, whether it's religion or politics or life or anything, it all goes away.
Yeah.
And for that hour, 2 hours, whatever it may be, you're able to relax and be in a safe place with guys that only want the best for you and are all working to make themselves better. And you don't even realize it. That's the thing. I say that like we're all working because I see it after being in the craft a while. Yeah. The guys don't even realize that's what's happening. And that's the beauty of it, is there's so much wild stuff going on all over the place that can really, like, it's tough for me because I do a lot of social media marketing. I'm always on it. I'm always plugged in. And, my wife and I in the evenings have really worked on, let's unplug a little bit from social media because it can be toxic. It's,
yeah, absolutely.
Whether it's, national things or whether it's just people you grovel with within your own local community that you see and you're like, Oh, what are they doing?
Yeah.
I didn't know about, all of that stuff. Well, that does no good for you.
We
And
have, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, yeah, no, I was kind of
Oh, I was just gonna say we have a local Facebook page for the town I live in.
yeah,
And I'm not on a city council or anything like that, but I am on like the EDC board, planning and zoning. And I do associate with council members a lot and the mayor a lot because the mayor's a Mason
yeah,
here, oddly enough, right? but
yes.
so I associate with these people and I talk to them and they're good people. But then you go to like the Facebook page, and it's toxic and
Oh
every
my God.
problem with the city is because of whoever's in charge or whoever was recently in charge. Many of them are friends or brothers or and it's like, man, I can't watch this stuff. I can't read this stuff. So I don't even check into it. And
Yeah.
I mean, you're absolutely right. What you put into you determines what comes out, right?
Yes.
Really determines your life, your day. And so if you put in negative things, you're going to have a negative outlook. You're going to sound like a negative person. So it's important to distance yourself from stuff like that.
We have a problem with, and I think Facebook has facilitated this, is we have a lot of people that know what the problems are and how they should be fixed, but none of those people run for office. You know what
Yes,
I mean?
yes.
They're very comfortable behind a keyboard telling you what's wrong and how to fix it. But
And you're
yeah,
talking about the people that are complaining, right? I learned something very aside from I don't want to run for city council anytime soon.
no, sure.
Something I learned is that what's the saying? Evil exists in the world because good men stand by and do nothing, right? But we have to speak up because
Yeah,
there's a vocal minority, and I believe it's a minority, but they're extremely vocal and extremely what's the word?
hostile.
Hostile. Like
Yeah.
they will team up against you. But I think there's come a time when good men just can't stand by any longer.
You know, the wild thing, and my big thing, especially in my podcast, is connections, and how, whether it's a physical connection or a thought connection, and that thought of, evil exists because good men stand by and do nothing. We were just talking about me running again, and I'm looking upstairs at my wife who's in bed, hoping she's not listening, because I kick it around, and and the thought is, and the last time we had to run, I didn't have to run. There was a 4-year term. There were 3 chairs open, and only 2 people ran,
Hmm.
and that was the thought process in this last time we were talking about it. Is, if I don't run, who does? And
If not me, who will?
that's exactly it.
Something I know we kind of went off of this, but like I
Sure.
said, sometimes tangents just happen, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Something that has always driven me to be involved, and you mentioned this earlier. The majority of the people that founded our country were Masons. They were
Yes.
Freemasons, and
Sure.
and being a native Texan, I'll tell you this: every president, every senator, every congressman of the Republic of Texas, every single one was a Freemason. We
Wow.
were a state founded by Masons, and
I did not know that. That's cool.
this didn't happen. Well, I'm sure in part like there was some Masonic influence, but the reason this happened is because we used to be an organization of men that stepped up.
Yes.
That's what it came down to. We would step up,
Sure.
and we've gotten away from that, and I think we need to return to that. And I'm not getting political or anything like that, but it doesn't have to be on your city council. Step up in your lodge, step up in your own life, step up in your family.
Sure.
But we're an organization of leaders, and
Yes.
we need to resume that mantle, and I think that's part of why we were so highly regarded at one point.
Yeah.
And I think we need to look at what was successful in the past, look at our predecessors and try to emulate them.
Yeah. You know that it's wild when you sit back, and that's something that I don't want to say I'd never thought of before, but you see the whole way through, Gerald Ford was the last Masonic president. And if you look at the upswing and downswing of how Masonry grew and kind of dropped, when Gerald Ford would have been coming into Masonry, would have been that upswing. And it's kind of from him just, I hate saying drop because that's not the right term, because times have changed and we're we're striving to move forward quickly and catch up to everything that we, for a long time we never did this stuff. But you're 100% right. It's something that if you see the problem and you can be the opposite of the problem, you have to step in.
You said something earlier, and
Sure.
I don't usually bring this up, and I don't want to go off on like anything wild about it or anything.
Yeah, no
But
problem.
I had a conversation. I think I was on a live not too long ago
Okay.
or maybe someone brought it up. I don't remember exactly, but it was about women in Freemasonry, right?
Yeah,
And you mentioned the lodge being like your fortress of solitude, like your safe space, right?
sure.
And to me, what I was thinking of as you were saying that is like that's again to me, my own opinion, which does
Yeah.
not reflect my Grand Lodge or my lodge or anything like that.
Yes, right,
To
exactly.
me,
Same.
that's why the lodges need to stay a male only environment,
Yes.
because there are benefits to being around women. Like, and it sounds like a stupid thing to even have to say, right? Like,
Right.
but I say that because on the other end of the spectrum, there are also benefits to being around just men, right?
Yeah.
And you can't behave. I don't know. You're always on kind of on guard around women, right?
I the
Because we're men. That's the way we're programmed, right?
I
We
can't
suck in.
say I can't say the things that I would normally. My wife sitting here,
Mhm.
we've been together 17, 18
Well, I
years.
already saw you look upstairs a few times, so I know what you're
you
talking
know,
about.
I can't talk too loud. You know, but that's the thing is, I know what I can say around my wife and what I can say. I don't want to upset the balance because we've been together so long. We have such a good family unit that I know what her likes and wants and needs are, and
Mhm.
vice versa. But I also know that I'm a guy. And guys doing there are things I say and look at and see that are the most inappropriate, stupid things that guys say, and I laugh at or whatever.
Yeah.
That or vice versa. And this is very, very different. You go to a lodge and you have that fellowship, that bonding, that joking around, busting each other up, but you also have a very vulnerable part. There's a part that, and I don't want to sound misogynistic or anything like that, but you know, as the father figure, as the husband figure,
Mhm.
I'm the rock.
Yeah.
And there are some times that I lean on my wife. I do that, but you know, for things that are going wrong, my wife vents to me. My children vent to her, she vents to me. And I'm the one that's there trying to keep everything above water.
Yep.
And that's a hard thing to do. And there's some times when you need to sit back and and I say this in my podcast all the time. I'm such a baby. Like you can see I'm welling up a little bit, but there are times when I go into lodge and I'm able to just sit with the current master, Jack Barnhouse, or whoever it is, and say, listen, man, I'm just, we've had a problem with my kid getting bullied. And that's a really hard subject to talk to somebody about.
Yes, it is.
It just is what it is. And it's nice that I can go in there and just completely vent to him about whatever. And, maybe he has or hasn't had somebody in there in that situation, but I know he's going to listen to me and at least take in what I'm saying and try to, look out for the best of me and not judge me. And that's something that maybe when I'm at home, I can't let that wall down because I have to tell my wife that we're going to be all right.
Yeah.
Whatever's going to happen, and it's not even the bullying thing, it's everything in life, whatever's going to happen with the boys or with bills, and thank God we're in a good situation, but we are going to be okay. And I have to make sure that that's the situation. Well, I can go to lodge and I can let my guard down, and just be open.
I'm reminded of two things. First off is I grew up watching The Simpsons, and I remember there was an episode when all the guys were standing outside a bus, and all the women were getting on the bus to go somewhere, and the bus drives off, and the guys just all relax, and like their guts start hanging out, like they were all sucking in because women are around, and
Right.
they just relax. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
And that's because we have to put on a certain. We don't even do it conscientiously. We put on
it's ingrained.
We put on a certain air when women are around, and like you talking about, there's some things we don't talk about our wives with, and it's not that we don't communicate or want to communicate, but we have to maintain a certain level of stoicism.
Yes.
With our spouses, we just have to. They come to us and complain, but because we're the rock, and if we start showing cracks in the foundation, that's a problem. Like, they don't know how to, and we're programmed differently.
Yes.
But yeah, and the other thing it reminds me of is, I don't know if you're on TikTok or anything like that, but there was a trend. There was a trend for a while where there was a woman. She's like, "You mean guys don't? I mean, guys, who do you talk to when things are bad?" And the trend was like, they're like, "Nobody, because I'm a guy. Nobody, because I'm a guy." And it's like, that hit hard because I know it's true, but on the other end of the spectrum, I couldn't relate because I'm a Freemason, and I can talk to people. I have brothers that I can come to if I really have a problem. I got 5, 6, 7 people I know right off the top of my head. I could call and say, "What do you think of this?" Or, "I just need to talk if you got a second."
Yeah.
And not to go down a dark path, but male suicide is increasing drastically.
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
It's at an all-time high. And I think it's because as men, we have to put on this face. We have to put on this air. We have to take on all the stress of our lives and our spouses and our children, and we can't show any cracks.
Yeah.
But it's like a dam with a crack, right? Like you can keep putting fingers in the hole, but eventually the whole thing's just going to go.
Oh my God.
And that's why it's important to have. That's why organizations like this are just as relevant as they ever were, if not more, because there's not that many outlets anymore. There's not those bowling leagues you could just go and BS with your buddies at.
Yes, that's true.
At this time, I would just like to open it up if you have any final thoughts or anything that you maybe wanted to say that you didn't get to.
I have to say, I want to thank you so much for being on here, because it's been like you said earlier in the podcast, the only messages we've had were a few Facebook messages and an email link to this Zoom. And before, I'm texting a guy, I'll throw out the drink club, Forest City, Tim Klein. We're texting back and forth, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm getting ready for this podcast. I'm a little nervous. I don't have show notes." And he's like, "You'll be fine. Why don't you just take a deep breath?" And here we are hours later. And if it wasn't because you and I both know as podcasters, it's time to wrap it up.
Yeah.
We could still just continue BSing the whole night, which is wild. But thank you again. I can't tell you how much I am indebted for you asking me to be on, and I can't wait for the time that you get to be on the Traveling Man Masonic podcast.
If you want to make it up to me, if I ever make my way to Ohio, just vouch for me, please. And it will be
yes.
we'll be good then.
I can't wait. I can't wait for the day. And I'm gonna jump off on just a little bit. It's wild how Freemasonry makes you want to travel to these places.
Yeah.
Because talking to you, talking to Fluff, talking to Randy Seipel, who's he was Senior Grand Warden of Indiana at the time, but he's moved up now. And if you haven't heard of Craftcast, it's the United Grand Lodge of England's podcast. James Dalton, I've been talking to him. They're They've just started. They're on episode 5, but
I
they're
think you
pretty
mentioned
good.
that in your last episode, didn't you? I heard that somewhere.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that's the thing that's wild about it is, you know, in the beginning, it was Freemasonry in East Palestine, and then Freemasonry in my district, and then in my state with annual communication. But because of this podcast, it's like, I want to go to Texas.
Come on, man.
And I want to go to England. I want to go to Alaska and see these guys and these people that I have such a genuine, the beliefs and connection with and friendship with. And it's only been a couple hours, but I don't need to think about it because I already know. And that's the beauty of Freemasonry.
We were talking about our Grand Lodge building. Our Grand Lodge is next week. So that's plenty of time. Just tell your wife to say, hey, take
plenty of time. Yeah. I'm gonna have to come live with you is the problem. But like I said before, it's something that I'm so indebted that you thought enough to have me on the podcast. Like I said, that imposter thing, I can't believe it, and I appreciate it so much. So thank you.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. It's an honor to have you on. And you made a post celebrating a benchmark with the podcast. It's like, why haven't I reached out to him yet? So that's what started the whole thing. Was like I said, we connected. You made a post. I was like, man,
yeah,
let's make it happen. So
I love it.
So just wrapping up on my end, thank you again so much for taking the time. I know this is it's almost midnight here. I think you're CST also, aren't you?
So, nope, I'm Eastern, so
you're Eastern.
It's almost 1 a.m.
Oh my God, I feel like worse then. So
no, it's cool. It's cool.
Definitely appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah.
Let's just real quick, just to remind everybody. So Jim Hall, Traveling Man Podcast. What is the best way for people to either connect with you or to get a hold of your? I know you're on Anchor, so it kind of reaches everything, but it's the best way for them to listen and contact you.
You know what? I'm on Anchor, so if you go to Anchor, search Traveling Man Podcast, we're on there. Social media, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we have all of those links live on there. So don't be afraid to reach out. And if you want to be a guest on the show, reach out too. I love talking to everybody. So give me a yell and we'll get a hold of you.
Awesome. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation, Jim.